Let me ask you something honest. If someone took away your phone, your delivery apps, your streaming service, and your Wi-Fi, and told you that you had to go out into the world and actually live in it for the next 30 days, what would your honest gut reaction be? Relief? Excitement? Or something closer to dread? Because here is what is happening to a growing number of people right now. And it is one of those things that is so gradual, so comfortable, so reasonable feeling at every single step that almost nobody catches it while it is happening to them. They have built a life that works perfectly on paper. Everything is optimized. Everything is efficient. Everything is available without friction. And somewhere inside that perfectly optimized life, something in them has started to go quiet. Not dramatically, not in a way that looks like a problem from the outside. Just quiet. Flat. Like a version of themselves that used to be louder has slowly stopped showing up. My name is Marcus. I know exactly what that feels like, because I lived inside it for 3 years without understanding what was happening. I had a setup most people would envy. I was comfortable. I was productive, or so I believed. I told myself I was an introvert finally living the right way. What I did not know was that my brain was making its own adjustments behind the scenes. Adjustments I never approved. Adjustments I could not see. And by the time I understood what had happened, I had lost things I did not even realize I was losing. What I am going to share with you is what the neuroscience actually shows, what psychologists are increasingly seeing in their practices, and what I had to face personally before anything in my life changed. This is not about shame. It is not about telling you how to live. It is about showing you something your brain is quietly doing right now that almost nobody talks about honestly. There are 7 things staying at home is doing to your brain. We are counting down from 7 to 1, because the closer we get to number 1, the deeper and more fundamental it becomes. Number 7 will shift how you see your daily choices. Number 3 will show you something about yourself that is genuinely uncomfortable to sit with. And number one is the thing underneath all of it. The one silent shift that makes every other item on this list not just possible, but inevitable. Let's go. Number 7. Your capacity for discomfort is quietly eroding. Everything in this video sits on top of this one, so I need to make sure this one lands properly. Discomfort is not the opposite of a good life. It is the mechanism of one. Every meaningful capability you have ever built required a period of being genuinely bad at something. Every relationship that has mattered required you to show up before you knew how it was going to go. Every version of yourself you actually respect was shaped by a period of real uncertainty, where the outcome was not guaranteed and the stakes were real. That friction is not incidental to growth. It is growth. It is the only raw material growth has ever been made from. Now here is what a fully controlled home environment does to your access to that raw material. It removes it, systematically, one comfortable decision at a time. You choose when to work. You choose when to eat. You choose who has access to you and for exactly how long. You choose the noise level, the light level, the temperature. Every variable in your environment bends to your preference. And day by day, without any single moment feeling like a significant choice, your world reshapes itself entirely around your existing comfort level. The problem is not the comfort itself. The problem is what the brain does with uninterrupted comfort over time. It recalibrates. It begins treating your current level of ease as the new normal, and anything beyond it as disproportionate, unreasonable, not worth the return. A difficult conversation that you would have handled without much thought 2 years ago now carries a weight that feels genuinely hard to justify. An invitation to something unfamiliar produces a calculation. Is this really worth the disruption that your previous self would not have even paused to make? The threshold for what counts as too much keeps quietly lowering. And because it lowers gradually, because there is never a single moment where you can point and say that is when it changed, it does not feel like erosion. It feels like self-knowledge, like finally understanding your limits. But limits and erosion are 2 very different things. And the home environment never creates the conditions that would force you to find out which one you are actually dealing with. Now, number 7 is about your capacity shrinking. But number 6 is the one that targets a completely different kind of person. The person who is highly driven, highly disciplined, and genuinely productive at home. Because what I am about to describe is the trap that gets the sharpest people. Not through laziness, not through distraction, but through something that looks and feels so convincingly like progress that the people inside it are almost always the last to see it. And when they finally do, It changes everything about how they have been measuring success. Number 6. You are producing more while growing less. Productivity at home can be completely genuine. I want to be clear about that. But there is a version of it, a version that is far more common than most people realize, that produces all the evidence of real progress while quietly replacing growth with repetition. And the reason it is so difficult to detect is that it feels, from the inside, indistinguishable from the real thing. Here is the mechanism. When the external structure of a workplace disappears, the colleagues, the observation, the social accountability of being seen, the brain does not simply become free. It replaces external structure with internal. Performance. You develop rituals, morning routines, shutdown protocols, deep work blocks with timers, elaborate systems for capturing and organizing your output. You are always doing something. But here is the question that the home environment never forces you to ask. Doing what? And for whom? And toward what? Research on people in high-autonomy work environments shows a pattern that repeats consistently. Without the friction of external feedback, without colleagues who see things differently, clients who push back, collaborators who introduce unexpected angles, people gradually migrate toward the work they already do well. Not because they are lazy, because the brain, optimizing for efficiency, finds it far easier to refine existing skills than to build new ones. And without external pressure demanding the development of new ones, it simply does not bother. The result is someone who is genuinely busy, genuinely producing output, and genuinely going in circles, while feeling the forward momentum of someone who is getting things done. Psychologists call this pseudo-productivity, not fake effort, real effort, aimed at a shrinking target. And here is what makes it particularly costly in a home environment. The outside world carries something that cannot be replicated inside four walls: genuine unpredictability. The question you had not thought to ask. The conversation that reframes the problem entirely. The perspective that arrives from a direction you are not watching. These are not interruptions to serious work. For most people doing serious work, these moments are where the most important thinking actually happens. Eliminate them in the name of focus and silence, and you may find yourself producing a very polished, very efficient, very refined version of last year's thinking. Now, you might be sitting with that and feeling like your motivation is still intact, that you still feel genuine hunger for what you are building. That drive is real and present. I am not going to dismiss that. But number 5 is going to show you something about that drive that lives entirely beneath the level of conscious experience. Something biological, something that has been shifting without your awareness for as long as you have been staying in. And when you understand what is actually happening, you will realize that what you have been calling drive may have already changed in ways you have not yet had a clear enough mirror to see. Number 5. Your brain's hunger for life is being slowly recalibrated. Most people think dopamine is about pleasure. It is not. That is one of the most consequential misunderstandings in popular psychology, and it matters enormously for what we are talking about. Dopamine is about anticipation. It is the chemical your brain releases not when you receive something good, but when it predicts something good is coming. It fires in the gap between now and what might happen next. And that gap, that space of uncertainty between effort and outcome, is where human motivation actually lives. When you have something real to move toward, a challenge with an uncertain outcome, a trip that requires preparation, a goal that demands something from you before it gives anything back, your brain begins releasing dopamine before a single action has been taken. That is what genuine excitement feels like from the inside. That chemical is the biological engine behind every meaningful thing a person has ever pursued. Now here is what happens to that engine inside a home environment where every need is immediately available. The gap disappears. Food arrives in 30 minutes. Entertainment begins in 1 second. Social contact happens without changing clothes. The uncertainty that dopamine is designed to bridge, the space between wanting something and actually having it, compresses almost to nothing. And when that gap consistently disappears, the brain stops generating the anticipation that once made ordinary life feel like it was going somewhere worth going. Over time, the dopamine system recalibrates to the only peaks still available inside those four walls: the notification, the scroll, the next episode, the small jolt of engagement from a screen. These are not failures of character. They are the brain doing exactly what it is designed to do, locating the available rewards, and pursuing them efficiently. But they are rewards without growth attached, stimulation without trajectory. And after enough of them, the brain begins to find everything else flat by comparison. A walk outside starts to feel like it produces nothing. A real conversation feels slower than a curated one. The texture of ordinary experience begins to fade, not because life got worse, but because the brain's baseline for what counts as rewarding quietly shifted, and real life can no longer clear the bar. This is not a motivation problem that discipline can fix. It is a calibration problem that only changing the inputs can address. Now, everything up to this point has been about psychology and behavior, things that live at least partially within conscious reach. But number 4 operates at a completely different level. It is happening in your body right now, in the part of your nervous system that runs beneath conscious awareness. And it is generating a symptom that millions of people have spent years explaining with the wrong story. They gave it a label. They built an identity around it. They accepted it as simply who they are. And the actual cause has been sitting in plain sight the entire time, hiding behind an explanation that was always more comfortable than the true one. Number 4, your nervous system has been retrained without your permission. Here is something that does not get taught nearly enough, and understanding it will change how you interpret a significant portion of your own daily experience. Your nervous system is a learning system, not metaphorically, literally. It takes in information from your environment continuously and uses that information to build a working model of what the world is like and what level of activation is appropriate for moving through it. Whatever you expose it to consistently, it adapts to. Whatever it adapts to becomes its new baseline for normal. When your consistent environment is quiet, controlled, predictable, and low stimulation, your nervous system calibrates to that baseline with precision. It learns that this is what safety feels like. This is the appropriate level of alertness for daily life. This is normal. And then the door opens. A busy street, a crowded room, a social situation with multiple people talking at once and no clear structure for how it unfolds. Your nervous system, calibrated to stillness, does not register this as simply different. It registers it as a deviation from normal. And deviations from normal, in the language of the nervous system, are processed as potential threat. Cortisol rises. Heart rate climbs. Attention narrows. The body moves into a low-grade defensive state. And the person experiencing all of this reaches for an explanation: social anxiety, overstimulation, introversion, sensitivity, landing on an identity story for what is actually a physiological one. This is measurable. Research on people with extended patterns of home confinement shows elevated baseline cortisol, increased startle sensitivity, and the gradual development of neophobia, a quantifiable, biological aversion to novel experiences that builds slowly and consistently the longer the controlled environment continues. The world did not get harder to be in. The nervous system got narrower in what it was prepared to handle. And a narrower nervous system does not present itself as a limitation. It presents as preference, as self-knowledge, as being someone who simply finds certain environments too much. One of those explanations closes the conversation permanently. The other opens it. And knowing which one you are actually dealing with is the difference between accepting a ceiling and recognizing a wall that was never supposed to be permanent. Now, number 4 was about what your body learned without consulting you. But number 3 goes somewhere far more personal than that. Because number 3 is not about a system or a mechanism. It is about something your own mind has been constructing in private, something that feels like your deepest, most honest self-understanding, and is actually something else entirely. This is the one that people push back on the hardest. And the reason they push back so hard is the same reason it matters so much. Number 3, you have built a version of yourself that the world has never met. Stay with me on this one, because the instinct when you hear it will be to feel like it does not apply to you. And that instinct is part of the mechanism. When you spend the majority of your time alone, without the daily friction of people who see you differently than you see yourself, who respond to you in ways you did not anticipate, who complicate the story you are telling about who you are, your self-concept stops being tested. And anything that stops being tested stops being accurate. In the absence of other people, your mind does not simply rest. It narrates. It constructs. It builds and continuously refines a version of you. Your values, your capabilities, your potential, your reasons for every choice you have made. And because nobody is present to challenge that construction with a different perspective, it becomes increasingly coherent, increasingly detailed, and increasingly untethered from the version of you that actually shows up when other people are in the room. You replay the conversations where you were at your best. You rehearse the responses you wish you had given. You develop a clear and compelling sense of what you stand for and what you are capable of. And slowly, without any single moment of conscious decision, the person you are in your own mind and the person you are in real rooms with real people begin to drift apart. Psychologists call this self-serving narrative bias. It exists in every human being to some degree. But in ordinary social life, it gets continuously corrected by the colleague who challenges your version of a story, by the friend who sees through your reasoning, by the stranger who responds to you in a way that does not match your internal script. That friction is not pleasant, but it is the only thing that keeps the person you believe you are calibrated to the person you actually are. Remove it, and the gap widens. Silently, convincingly, until the day you step back into the world and discover, with genuine confusion, that people do not respond to you the way they do inside your own head. That the confidence you feel at home evaporates inside real conversations. That the version of yourself you have spent all that time developing in private has no traction in public, because it was constructed entirely in the absence of the one thing that makes any self-understanding real: reality. Now, number 3 was about your inner world losing its accuracy. Number 2 is about something that affects your entire experience of being alive, something so foundational that when it starts to break down, it pulls everything else with it. Most people have felt this effect dozens of times and explained it with the wrong cause every single time. What I am about to show you is the real explanation. And the moment it clicks, you will look back at entire chapters of your life and finally understand what was actually happening. Number 2. Your brain has lost its ability to locate itself in time. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You sit down in the morning with a clear intention for the day. You look up, and the afternoon is already gone. Not because you were absorbed in something meaningful. Not because time flew the way it does when you are fully alive in what you are doing. Just because it passed. And when you try to reconstruct where it went, there is almost nothing to show for the hours. Tuesday is indistinguishable from Wednesday. The week ends, and you cannot identify what made it different from the one before it. That is not a discipline problem. That is a neuroscience problem, and it has a specific, identifiable cause. Your brain does not track time through an internal clock alone. It tracks time through external markers that scientists call Zeitgebers, a German term meaning time givers. Morning light activating the retina triggers the circadian system to fully engage. Moving from one physical location to another creates a cognitive boundary, a clear neurological signal that one chapter of the day has ended and a new one has begun. Observing other people moving through the arc of their own days gives your brain a reference point for where you are in yours. These cues are not background noise. They are the scaffolding your brain uses to construct a coherent experience of time moving, to register that yesterday was genuinely distinct from today, that this hour has a different quality from the last one, that the week has a shape and a direction and a meaningful relationship to everything that follows it. Strip that scaffolding away. When every day unfolds inside the same room, under the same artificial light, with the same sounds and the same visual environment from morning until night, and the brain's ability to construct that structure begins to collapse. Days blur together. Time compresses and stretches in ways that feel arbitrary. The future starts to feel less like something real that is approaching and more like an abstraction, present in thought but entirely absent in any felt sense of momentum. And here is the connection that almost no one makes. A brain that cannot locate itself in time loses its ability to generate genuine motivation toward future goals. Because motivation toward the future requires the future to feel real. It requires a lived, embodied sense of time moving, of now being different from then, and then being worth moving toward. When that sense erodes, goals remain intellectually present but emotionally hollow. You know what you want. You can describe it in detail. You just cannot seem to close the distance between knowing it and actually moving toward it, and you keep reaching for explanations that have nothing to do with the actual cause. We are at number 1. And before we go in, I want to say something about what it is, because it is different from everything else on this list. Every other number described a specific mechanism, a system changing, a capacity narrowing, a process running in the wrong direction. Number one is none of those things. Number one is what your brain concludes after all of those things have been running long enough. It is the story your brain writes to explain all of it and to make sure it continues. It is the most sophisticated thing on this list, and it is the hardest to see clearly because it does not feel like something that happened to you. It feels like something you finally figured out. Number one, your brain has started writing the story of why staying in is the right choice. This is the one I wish I had understood at the very beginning. There is a process in neuroscience called neural pruning. The brain continuously evaluates which pathways are worth maintaining and which can be released. The criterion is simple and completely unsentimental: use. Pathways that are regularly activated get strengthened and preserved. Pathways that go unused are gradually and quietly dismantled, not all at once, but efficiently, over time, without announcement. When you stop moving through the world, when genuine social complexity, physical novelty, and real human unpredictability are absent from your daily life, the neural infrastructure built to navigate those things begins to weaken. The brain does not experience this as a loss. It registers it as optimization. Resources being reallocated away from functions that are no longer being called upon. But here is what Dr. John Cassiopo's decades of research on social withdrawal revealed, and this changes everything. The brain does not simply become less capable in social situations. It actively reorients. The neural systems responsible for processing other people, for reading intentions accurately, for generating trust, for finding connection genuinely rewarding, begin to degrade. And in their place, the brain develops a heightened sensitivity to social threat. Neutral interactions begin to feel ambiguous in the wrong direction. Unfamiliar situations register as risk before they register as possibility. The energy required to engage with the unpredictability of other people starts to feel genuinely disproportionate to whatever might come from it. And then, and this is the part that matters most, the brain does what brains always do with the evidence available to them. It generates a conclusion. A very fluent, very personalized, very coherent conclusion about why the world out there is simply not worth the return. Why people are draining rather than energizing. Why the life inside, quiet, controlled, predictable, is actually the life that suits you. Why going out consistently costs more than it gives back. The conclusion feels like wisdom. It accounts for your specific history and your specific temperament. It is detailed enough and personal enough that it does not feel like something a shrinking brain produced to justify its own contraction. It feels like something you discovered, something true, something that finally explains why you have always been this way. And discoveries, unlike conditions, do not feel like things that need to change. That is the mechanism. That is why number one is the most important thing on this list. Not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is the story that makes every other number invisible. Once that story is convincing enough, the erosion stops feeling like erosion. The narrowing stops feeling like narrowing. The contraction of your world stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like arriving. I want to close with something that is not a push toward action. You do not need another person telling you to do more or be more. What I want to leave you with is something quieter than that, and I think more useful. The brain is plastic. Every single thing in this video, the pruned pathways, the recalibrated reward system, the retrained nervous system, the untested self-concept, the collapsed sense of time, the story built to justify all of it. None of it is fixed. None of it is who you are. Every one of those things is the result of inputs. And inputs can change. But real change of that kind does not begin with a plan or a decision to be better. It begins with something much simpler and much harder than either of those things. It begins with one honest question, asked without reaching immediately for a comfortable answer. Not, am I happy here? That question is too easy, and a comfortable environment is specifically designed to produce a yes. The real question is this: if the person I am becoming right now continued on the exact trajectory I am currently on, would I be proud of who I eventually arrive at? Not comfortable, not optimized, not efficient. Proud. Sit with that. Not to punish yourself. Not to create urgency where there does not need to be any. Just to find out what your honest answer actually is, before the story your brain is writing becomes convincing enough that the question stops feeling worth asking. If something in this video reached something real in you, share it with someone you think needs to hear it. not as a criticism of how they are living, as a reminder that they still have time to ask the question before the answer hardens into something they can no longer see around. I will see you in the next one.